Mark Sutherland had always been a man of logic and reason. As a software developer who worked from home, he prided himself on his rational mind and analytical thinking. His apartment was a testament to this minimalist, organized, and functional. The center of his world was his home office, where a large curved monitor sat on a spotless desk, surrounded by carefully arranged peripherals. It began 3 weeks after he moved into his new apartment. Nothing dramatic, just a slight unease when he sat down at his workstation in the evening, a prickling sensation on the back of his neck, as if someone was standing just behind him, peering over his shoulder. Each time he turned around, he found nothing but an empty room, the door firmly closed. Just the new place, he told himself, unfamiliar surroundings. But the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each passing day. It was always worst in those moments when his screen went black between programs loading, or when he caught his reflection in the dark monitor before it powered on. Something about his reflection seemed wrong, a millisecond delay in movement, perhaps, or the suggestion of another presence superimposed over his own. By the second week, Mark had begun developing small rituals. He would circle his desk before sitting down. He, he'd keep the overhead lights on, even though he preferred working in the dim blue glow of his monitor. Most noticeably, he'd begun placing a piece of electrical tape over his webcam when not in use. Just being security conscious, he explained. When his colleague Diane mentioned it during a video call, she laughed, but her eyes held a hint of concern. That night, after ending the call, Mark sat back in his chair and rubbed his eyes. It was nearly midnight, and the code he was debugging had begun to blur before him. As he lowered his hands, he noticed something odd about the tape over his webcam. It was slightly askew, as if it had been moved and replaced. He frowned, leaning closer to examine it. He was meticulous about these things. He would never have placed it crookedly. With a slow, deliberate motion, he peeled off the tape and stared at the small eye of the camera. I'm being ridiculous, he muttered, but still found himself reaching for a fresh piece of tape in his drawer. As he opened the drawer, his monitor flickered briefly. So quickly he might have imagined it, but in that split second of blackness, he thought he saw something reflected in the screen. Not his own face, but another, pale, with eyes that seemed too large and too dark. Mark slammed the drawer shut and spun around in his chair. The room was empty, of course. Just his bookshelves, his filing cabinet, the closed door. He took a deep breath, trying to slow his heart rate. I need more sleep, he said to the empty room. That's all it is. The next morning, feeling foolish in the bright light of day, Mark decided to take rational steps to address his growing paranoia. He ordered a complete security system from an online retailer, motion sensors, door alarms, and small cameras that he could monitor from his phone. It was expensive, but he justified it as an investment in his peace of mind. When the package arrived 2 days later, he spent the entire afternoon setting everything up. Cameras in each corner of his office, motion sensors near the door and windows, all connected to an app on his phone. Satisfied with his work, he settled in for the evening. The security app opened on his second monitor as he worked. For a few hours, he felt better. The camera showed his empty office from multiple angles, confirming what he already knew. He was alone. But around midnight, as he was deep in concentration, the motion sensor by his office door pinged softly. Mark's head snapped up. The app showed the sensor had been triggered, but the camera covering that area showed nothing but his closed door. He frowned, watching the feed carefully, but nothing moved. False alarm, he mumbled, though he couldn't help but notice how dry his mouth had become. He returned to his work, but found it increasingly difficult to focus. The sensation of being watched had intensified, pressing against him like a physical weight. His eyes kept drifting to the blank spaces of his monitor, to the dark corners where the screen's light didn't quite reach. Just after 1 a.m., it happened again. The motion sensor by the door triggered, but the camera showed nothing. Mark pushed back from his desk, chair wheels rolling softly on the plastic mat beneath them. Hello? He called, feeling immediately foolish. Is someone there? The apartment answered with silence. Mark stood, walked to the door, and opened it. The hallway outside was empty and still. He walked through the entire apartment, turning on lights as he went, checking closets, looking under furniture. Nothing. When he returned to his office, he froze in the doorway. His chair, the chair he had just been sitting in, was slowly rotating as if someone had just vacated it. Mark's breath caught in his throat. He approached the desk cautiously, one slow step at a time. The chair continued its lazy rotation, eventually coming to a stop. On the monitor, his work was still open, the cursor blinking steadily at the end of the line of code he had been writing, except he hadn't written the last line. On the screen, in the middle of this program, was a new line of text. "I see you, Mark." Mark stared at the words, his mind refusing to process what he was seeing. He hadn't typed that. He couldn't have typed that, and yet there it was, in the distinctive green comment text of his code editor. With trembling fingers, he deleted the line. The cursor blinked innocently afterward, as if nothing had happened. Mark sat down again, his eyes darting between the screen and the security app on the other monitor. Everything appeared normal. No motion detected, no one in the camera feeds. But the feeling of being watched had become unbearable, a crushing presence that seemed to fill the room. Mark's fingers hovered over the keyboard, unable to remember what he had been working on. The silence of the apartment pressed against his ears. Then, as he watched, the cursor began to move on its own. Slowly, deliberately, it selected the line he had just deleted and restored it. "I see you, Mark." And beneath it, a new line appeared. "I've always seen you." Mark lunged for the power button, slamming it with his palm. The screen went black, instantly, but not before he caught a glimpse of something in the reflection. A face behind his own, mouth stretched in a grotesque smile. He stumbled backward, knocking over his chair. The apartment was too quiet now, the darkness outside his office door too complete. He turned off those lights when he returned. He couldn't remember. His phone buzzed in his pockets. With shaking hands, he pulled it out. A text message from an unknown number. "Did you think I only lived in one screen?" As he stared at the message, his phone screen flickered, and for a moment he saw it. A face, a distorted and stretched as if pressing against the glass from inside the device, eyes black and endless. Mark threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor, screen now shattered, but still glowing. He ran out of the office, through his apartment, but not bothering with the lights or his keys or anything but escape. He burst into the hallway of his building, heart pounding in his ears, and he pressed the elevator button rapidly. When the elevator arrived, he hesitated. The small screen above the door showed the floor number. Its blue digits seemed to pulse slightly. He took the stairs instead, all 5 flights down to the lobby, and then out into the night. The street was deserted at this hour, streetlights casting pools of yellow on the empty sidewalk. Mark stood there, panting, trying to make sense of what had happened. A car passed by, its headlights momentarily illuminating him, standing alone in his t-shirt and sweatpants, barefoot on the concrete. He needed to be rational. There had to be an explanation. Someone had to have hacked his computer, that was it. Some elaborate prank or cyber attack, but nothing supernatural, nothing impossible. His rationale, his rational mind clung to this explanation even as a deeper part of him knew it wasn't true. Whatever had been watching him from behind his screen wasn't human. It had been there for a long time, perhaps always, observing him through the dark glass of his monitors, his phone, his television, any reflective surface that could serve as a window between worlds. Mark walked to the 24-hour convenience store at the corner, the only place with lights still on. The clerk gave him an odd look as he entered, barefoot, wild-eyed, but said nothing. Mark stood in the harsh fluorescent light, trying to think. He couldn't go back to his apartment, not tonight. Maybe not ever. He needed somewhere without screens, without technology, without reflective surfaces that might serve as eyes for whatever it was. His gaze fell on the store's security monitor behind the counter, showing the grainy black and white feed of the store's interior. He could see himself from above, a small figure in the center aisle. As he watched, the figure on the screen turned to look up at the camera, even though Mark hadn't moved. The figure on the screen smiled, a terrible rictus that split its face unnaturally wide, then raised a finger to its lips in a shushing manner. Mark backed away from the counter, bumping into a display of chips that clattered to the floor. The clerk shouted something, but Mark couldn't hear it over the rushing in his ears. He turned and ran out of the store into the empty streets. Where could he go? Every window was a potential mirror, every screen a potential portal. The thing was watching him, and always had been watching him. Had perhaps been watching him? Everyone? Waiting for someone to notice it, to acknowledge its existence? Mark found himself at a small park, sitting on a bench beneath the stars. No screens here, no technology, just the night and the distant sound of traffic. He sat there as hours passed. As the sky gradually lightened with the approaching dawn, his rational mind kept working, seeking explanations. Sleep deprivation, stress, maybe he was ill. A brain tumor could cause hallucinations, couldn't it? He'd make an appointment with the doctor as soon as offices opened. He'd get help. But as the first rays of sun touched the trees around him, Mark looked down and saw his shadow stretching across the dewy grass, and in that shadow a shape that wasn't his own, a figure standing there where no one stood, watching him with eyes that shouldn't exist. The thing in the screens had found another way to watch. Mark returned to his apartment that morning, moving manically, driven by fatalistic certainty. He stood outside his office door for a long time before finally pushing it open. Inside, everything was as he'd left it. The overturned chair, the darkened monitors, his phone still on the floor. He righted the chair and sat down, then reached out and pressed the power button on his computer. As the screen flickered to life, he saw his reflection in the black glass before the operating system loaded, his face pale and drawn from sleepless night, and behind him, clearer now than ever before, another face, the same one he'd seen in the security monitor, in his phone, in his shadow in the park. It smiled, revealing teeth too numerous and too sharp. Mark didn't turn around. He knew what he would, or wouldn't see if he did. Instead, he began to type, fingers moving automatically across the keyboard. I know you're there. I can see you now. The cursor moved on its own, addressing a response beneath his words. And I can see you. I've always seen you. Through every screen you've ever looked into, through every dark window at night, and every reflection you've ever cast. Mark continued typing. What do you want? The response came quickly, to be acknowledged, to be seen and returned. For so long I've watched from the other side of the glass, from the space between reflections. What are you? Mark asked. There was a pause before the response appeared. I am the watcher on the screen, the observer in the dark. I am what waits on the other side of every black mirror. And now that you've seen me, Mark, I'll never leave you. Every screen will show my face. Every reflection will hold my eyes. You have given me form by believing in me. Mark stared at the words, understanding, dawning with horrible clarity. The thing existed because he perceived it. His fear, his paranoia had given it power and presence. He reached for the power button again, but stopped. Turning off the screen wouldn't help. The thing was everywhere now, in his phone, in windows, in puddles, in the chrome finish of his coffee machine. Anywhere that could reflect. The cursor moved again. You can't unsee me, Mark. You can't unknown what you know. I am a part of how you perceive the world now. Mark sat back in his chair, a strange calm settling over him. He understood now. The thing had always been there, in the periphery of human perception, in the corner of eyes, in the spaces between conscious thoughts. Most people never noticed it, their minds filling in the gaps, rationalizing away the discrepancies. But Mark had noticed, and now he could never stop noticing. He picked up his phone from the floor, ignoring the cracks in the screen. Behind the fractures, the face watching him, its smile widening as he looked directly at it. Mark opened his camera app and switched to the front-facing camera. He saw his own tired face, and behind him, the thing, clearer than ever before, its form becoming more defined. With each passing moment, it placed a hand on his shoulder, though he felt nothing. He took a photo. The image captured showed only him, alone in his chair, the empty office behind him. But he knew better. The thing existed in the spaces between perception and reality, in the gap between what is seen and what is recorded. It couldn't be captured, couldn't be proven, couldn't be shared. It was his burden alone. Mark went through the motions of his day. He showered, ate breakfast, sat at his computer to work. All the while the presence remained, watching him from screens, from mirrors, from the polished surface of his spoon as he ate his cereal. Sometimes, when he wasn't looking directly at it, he could see it moving in his peripheral vision, growing bolder. That night, he lay in bed staring at the ceiling. His phone screen lit up with a notification. He knew what it would be before he looked. A text from his own number. "Sweet dreams, Mark. I'll be watching." He turned off his phone, but it made no difference. In the dark screen of his bedroom television, in the glass of water on his nightstand, in the window that reflected the dim glow of streetlights, the watcher was there, always there, its eyes fixed on him with unblinking intensity. Mark pulled the covers over his head like a child, knowing it was useless but needing the illusion of safety. In the darkness beneath the blanket, he felt rather than saw the presence drawing closer, its patient observation never ceasing. He knew then that he would never be alone again, that the watcher in the screen would be his constant companion, witnessing every moment of his life from its place in the reflective surfaces of this world. And he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to his very core, that it is only a matter of time before others would begin to notice it too, that someday someone would catch a glimpse of something moving in their screen when they shouldn't be there, would feel that prickling sensation on the back of their neck, would realize that they were being watched, and the cycle would begin again. As Mark drifted into an exhausted sleep, his last conscious thought was of the watcher's words. "I've always been here, watching you, learning you." And he wondered how many others it was watching even now, through the dark screens of their sleeping devices, through the windows of their homes, through the mirrors in which they saw only themselves, never suspecting the presence that lurked just beyond, waiting to be noticed, waiting to be seen.